my mind is still kind of blown by that metric of, and I forget the time period, but benefits being like the 10th or 12th, I forget the number you mentioned, cost line item, and now it's risen to second highest.
Yep. Yeah.
And this ever increasing complexity of the benefits business is just crazy, is this kind of Stockholm syndrome that exists among HR teams where, and I just admitted to this, like benefits are seen as too complex or risky to challenge or change. And so you just kind of go with the status quo. How are like some of the HR leaders that you're working with, what did it take for them to break out of that cycle?
We are seeing more HR leaders break out of that cycle this year in 2025 than we ever have. Nava is a 5.5-year-old company. This has been by far the busiest year for us in the market. I think probably one of the core drivers behind that is that it's also the worst renewal season in about 15 years, right? The average healthcare renewal increase is pushing around 10%. Many employers are getting 20, 30, 40% increases. We just signed a client that literally is coming into Nava, almost 500 employees, with an 80% renewal increase from United Healthcare. That's just like, there's no other facet of a business where like, and we're already talking about millions of dollars of spent here, right? So I think what we are seeing is like the pain from the burning platform is getting so bad, or the temperature is getting so hot, that I think that is pushing more folks to go, okay, it's time to be courageous. Like we have reached the breaking point, etc.
You're listening to the Modern People Leader podcast, where we go behind the scenes with today's top HR leaders and work experts. We talk to them about how they've gotten to where they're at, what they do every day, and what they see coming next for the future of work. Hope you enjoy.
Brandon, welcome to the Modern People Leader. I was just commenting before we hit record that Daniel rarely like calls me immediately after an intake or prep call and just like starts raving about a potential guest. I mean, when you've done almost 300 of these, we did that in the early days. I don't get that a lot anymore. And, a few weeks ago after y'all met, he called me immediately, was like, oh my God, dude, this is going to be so great. So we're thrilled to have you today. How are you doing?
Doing great. I'm equally thrilled. I think I came off that prep call pretty fired up as well. So yeah, pumped to dive in with you guys.
Awesome. Well, we have a lot to cover before we get into the meat of what we want to talk about today. We have a few traditions on the MPL. The first is what we call Good News Stories. It's a way to kick things off with a little positivity. We each share a personal or work-related good news story from the last couple of weeks. We prefer for our guests to go first. So what do you have?
Awesome. I think I'm going to share a work one because it's super relevant. So at our company town hall, we always share a moment of sort of like moving the mission forward. And in this case, last town hall, we had a story where one of the members that we serve and one of the employers that we serve got a $217,000 bill for a bunch of different healthcare services. And we're sort of at their wits' end. They're like, it was coded as out of network, all sorts of crazy stuff. Long story short, they went through they opened up the Nava Benefits app. They're like, help, I've got a medical bill that I don't understand and it is scary. We were able to negotiate and recode that bill down to a $465 bill. So $217,000 to $465 through a bunch of magic that we can get into at some point that our member advocacy team and technology can do. And it was just like one of those moments where like, this is why we do this, right? This is fixing healthcare sort of personified. So that's sort of work joy.
Love it. Daniel, what do you have?
So this weekend will be the 5th annual J-Day. So J-Day is an annual celebration of a friend that we lost 6 years ago. And every October, his family invites everybody to their land out in Wimberley, which is like 50 minutes outside of Austin, and eat barbecue, drink beer. There's some live music, hang out with all of the old friends, and try to like tell as many Jansen stories as possible. And yeah, so I'm excited for this weekend, and it's always fun celebrating my.
Yeah, I'm bummed to miss this year. This will be the first year I don't attend. And what Daniel didn't share, Jansen was a childhood friend of Daniel's. But for the people that know the Modern People Leader origin story, Daniel was so before I did Modern People Leader, I had my own startup for 9 years that was an engagement survey company. And Daniel was like hire number 3. We hired him as like an intern. I'd hired his brother brother when I was at Goldman. Nick became an all-stars in private equity. And I got a call that Daniel needed an internship. Hire Daniel. Daniel kills it. I'm like, Daniel, how do I find another you? His first referral was Jansen. And so Jansen worked with us for 5 years, and he eventually became our head of analytics. And so not only did we lost a friend, we lost a colleague. So this day of celebration, it's an amazing day, and I'm bummed that I'm going to miss that tomorrow, but I'll be there in spirit. My good news, I had this harebrained idea June of last year that Daniel and I should get into live events. And I won't go into that origin story. That's a whole thing. Look at my LinkedIn posts about it. And we are here. We're having a full circle moment. So we had our first live event in September of last year, and that was in Austin. Then we tried to replicate that success in Miami. We failed. We had to cancel, total bomb. We sold out the sponsorships, but we couldn't sell any tickets. So we canceled the event, and we kind of licked our wounds. We looked at the data, we figured out a smarter approach, and we committed to 4 events this year. And after selling out events in Boston, San Francisco, New York, we're now coming back to Austin. And celebration of the successes we've had, we've decided to make it bigger and better. And so we're shifting it from a half-day event to a 2-day event that is going to include an innovation hall. We get the privilege of working with a lot of cool HR tech companies. Most of those are AI native or AI first at this point. We're going to talk a lot about what that means and some of the cool things that Nava's doing in the benefit space. And so we're live. We're selling tickets. I think we've booked 4 of 8 categories already. We may expand that to 10 based on demand. So super excited with the early traction we're getting. That's December 10th and 11th in Austin, and it's going to be a great time. But enough about MPL. We're here today, Brandon, to talk about you, and some of our founder CEO conversations are my favorite conversations. We've had people like Wade, CEO at Zapier, on, and a few others. We haven't done a ton of these, and so I'm really excited about this conversation. But I think a great place to start would be your origin story. So walk us through your journey, your founder journey, how that led to you becoming the CEO at Nava Benefits.
Love it. And I feel like we should be at that Austin event. So I'm going to put a pin at that, and we should chat about
Let's make that happen. Yeah.
We're spending a ton of time in Austin now. Yeah. So first off, just what is Nava? Nava is a AI-enabled benefits brokerage on a mission to fix healthcare, as gaudy as that sounds. And the 2 levers that we really pull are sort of this idea of, what if every American healthcare consumer could have a personalized benefits concierge with them at all times, helping them navigate the Byzantine system of healthcare? So it's kind of one part of it, advocacy. And then what if every HR team in America had the most sophisticated sort of analytics when it comes to unlocking healthcare innovation and bringing it into the health plans that they're designing and building for their employees? We think about it as how do you Moneyball that healthcare spend that is going up 10 or 15% year over year? So that's what we're all about. And we'll get into the technology component, but technology, AI, machine learning is a big part of the how we do that, combined with really talent. That's the headline. How I got to that, headline is sort of an interesting long story. My background is not in healthcare. I've been a venture-backed startup founder for almost 15 years. I've been super fortunate and had some success, kind of been at the right place at the right time in my last company, VTS, and we built a scaled organization that ended up being the category leader in a sort of a vertical SaaS niche. When I exited that business in 2018, I took a 10-month sabbatical with my wife, and we sort of found ourselves with a little bit of vocational freedom and time on our hands. And I went and we traveled around the world. And I think, Daniel, you and I were talking about this. I went to 16 countries and just had time and space to think about what I wanted to do next with my career and the impact that I wanted to make. And there's sort of 2 things that were really important to me personally. One was I made the decision that I wanted to work on a societal problem. First and foremost, I'm a pragmatist, but I believe in the opportunity to do good and do well. And I wanted to work on one that really sort of resonated with my own kind of personal experience. And for me, healthcare is sort of a personal journey. I grew up in northern Alaska in a very rural blue collar environment. And I think through my childhood, watched a lot of people get stomped on by the healthcare system. Medical bankruptcy, having to do GoFundMe before GoFundMe was even a platform, and sort of raise money. And so that was kind of part of it. That I like knew that healthcare was unsafe, as sort of ironic. So that was something that I brought with me. And so healthcare was like always super interesting to me as a problem that I kind of felt viscerally and seeing kind of through the lens of folks that I cared about. And then actually along that journey, there was like an acute moment where we were in Japan and I was skiing and I actually tore my ACL in the middle of nowhere in northern Japan in the backcountry. And I had this healthcare moment where I'm 3,400 miles away from home. I need healthcare. And immediately I'm like, okay, I got to go back to the United States. Let's go get this figured out. I'm like on the phone with insurance. I'm on the phone with like doctors in New York City, which is where I was based at the time. And I'm getting close. It's like, I've got to get an MRI, all this stuff. And the numbers that were coming back, it's like, it's going to be like $3,300 for an MRI, maybe $3,800. There's all these kind of very like big numbers for sort of just kind of the first step in this, in this healthcare journey. I was like, okay, that's a lot. Maybe I'll just go down the street to the clinic in northern Japan, in this place I was in, Niseko, and just see what the, kind of what the options are for me. And I went in and I'm like, I don't have any insurance in your country. And they're like, I'm sorry, you're going to be a cash payer. So like, this is going to be very expensive for you to get an MRI here and sort of undergo, any sort of treatment. I was like, well, yeah, okay, got it. How much is that going to cost? And they're like, it's going to be $128 for that MRI. And there was just this like visceral moment as I was in this kind of journey of like, what am I going to do next? And thinking about healthcare at a very high level, where it's just like the like market failures of like in New York City, an MRI costing $3,800, and in a town in Japan, that same MRI on cash is costing $128. I was just like, this is just fundamentally broken. I've got like it sort of was like the wake up moment for me to go like, I want to participate in the fixing of the healthcare marketplace. And that really kind of kicked me in gear. And I was like, this is the decision I'm making. I'm going to go work on healthcare. And without any really strong point of view on exactly what the solution was going to be. I'm a founder that knows how to build technology companies for industries that don't like using technology. I'm a pretty good first principles thinker. And so we kind of started the journey of pulling the thread. And I recruited my old co-founder from my last business, who's our chief product officer. He's a cancer survivor. He ended up with almost 6 figures in medical debt going through his cancer journey, despite the fact that he was going entirely in network and following all the rules. And he's like, how did I get here? And much of that went into collection. So he had his own kind of healthcare journey that was like, I'm passionate about this problem. And so we got to the front door. We're like, okay, how do we let's work on healthcare? And we started where we kind of know the most folks in the venture-backed like startup community. We were like, how do we talk to every amazing digital health and health tech founder out there? And we were blown away by the innovation that is occurring and being built on the supply side of the healthcare marketplace. Founders building alternative health plans that are completely rethinking how you actually connect employees to care and saving a ton of money, providing better outcomes, getting people the care they need more efficiently. And yet they're totally niche and almost no one's heard of them. And then we spent a bunch of time with HR leaders who are sort of the buyer of healthcare for half of Americans. And what we heard from the HR leaders over and over again was like, listen, my teams are getting compressed. I am being asked to do far more year over year with a smaller team. This healthcare marketplace is getting more and more complicated and more expensive. And basically the answer to the question of like, how do you buy healthcare? They go, I got a broker, and they do it. And I hope they're doing a good job, because I'm increasingly trying to outsource the entire job of healthcare design, healthcare purchasing, healthcare deployment to that partner as my team gets leaner and leaner and I'm being asked to do more. And we're like, that's really interesting. And we sort of heard the same thing on the supply side, where these really innovative digital health solutions or health plans were like, my biggest problem is distribution to those employers. And I have to go through this traditional broker who doesn't really want to talk about innovation. They want to talk about sort of the status quo traditional approach to this stuff. And we got really interested in the role of the benefits broker as effectively the market maker or distribution layer in employer-sponsored healthcare. And what we saw when we talked to both sides of that marketplace was an HR community that wanted more from that stakeholder and that partner than they were getting. They're getting sort of Groundhog's Day. We heard that a lot when it came to strategy and their teams being buried in benefits administration. And from the supply side, we're like, there's an entire sort of like alt marketplace of healthcare solutions that are not making their way into the heads and the hands of the buyer of healthcare in America, most employers. If you're not a Boeing or a Walmart or a Fortune 500 company with 15 or 20 people in your benefits department. So that's what got us to the benefits broker as a potential change agent in fixing healthcare, and the opportunity to build a new kind of benefits broker that brings together sort of expert consulting that unlocks the innovation happening and brings it down market, paired with a technology platform that enables scalably like advocacy and support for employees and automating a bunch of the admin that is burying most HR teams today as they're just trying to get more done with less resources. So yeah, that's maybe the 3 or 4 minute story, and happy to pull from there.
And so you've partly answered this by describing the old way, which is this Groundhog's Day scenario every year that repeats itself with the traditional benefits broker. If you had to describe, to a stranger what Nava Benefits does in like 30 seconds and how it's different from that old way, how would you
Yeah.
describe it?
Yeah. Oftentimes, what I say to family members is we're building like a virtual benefits department in a box for small employers that can't afford a benefits department. And we use technology to help employees get answers to their questions about all things related to benefits and healthcare. And we use technology to help HR teams shop more effectively for healthcare solutions for their employees so they can get better deals. So that like benefits department in a box has sort of resonated with folks who are like, oh my gosh, I don't have that. I literally cannot, I'm a 400-person company with a 3-person HR team. And so that's, I think, the framework is like, what if you had a super sophisticated benefits department in a box that handles strategy, administration, and advocacy all at once, all for the same price that you're paying your traditional.
Man, the Nava's value proposition, the solution, the story just all really resonates with me. I spent 25 years in or around the HR space, first as a practitioner, the last 12 and a half years as an entrepreneur. And seeing as I grew up in total rewards, I've always been embarrassed to admit that I really don't get benefits. And to be totally honest, like, yeah, I understand the business, the challenges, the costs, the structure, what needs to happen, the process, but I still just kind of go into zombie mode when the topic of benefits comes up. So much so that as a CEO, I was like, you know what? I'm outsourcing this. And I found a PEO. Like I just didn't even, and so for me, the traditional benefits, it just feels like a relic of the past. Some of the words you use, networks, brokers. I mean, that just reeks of like good old boy and old school and convoluted. And so I wish something like this existed, way back then. And I know that there's a market for this, right now. And so I want to just like jump in because we have a lot of questions for you. And so I think most would admit that HR teams still treat benefits as a cost center, something that you've got to manage. It's aspirin, right? It's something that you have to have, and we're going to do it. And there's a year-end process, et cetera, et cetera. Something that jumped out at me, that you mentioned in the prep call is that you believe benefits is the most strategic decision a company makes outside of hiring. And so I want to start there. Tell me more about what you mean. And it did like the add on to that is what are some of the biggest misconceptions HR leaders have when it comes to, benefits and a benefit strategy?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think the place that I first start is just benefits is now the second largest spend item at pretty much every employer in America behind their payroll, behind salaries of their employees. And so just like when you just step back and go, who owns that benefits line item, the strategy behind it, the business case that needs to be made, it is the HR team. And so number one, like, and by the way, about 12 years ago, that was number 10 on the list. So benefits went from 10th largest sort of line item to number 2 in the last 10 years because healthcare inflation has absolutely skyrocketed and demand for benefits from employees as a part of their compensation package has only grown over time. So number one, it is just dollars and cents, one of the biggest financial decisions that your company is making every single year. And guess who owns it? You do, HR. So step one. And then number 2, I think what we have seen post-COVID is that especially outside of sort of, let's call it the high salary technology markets, your benefits package is becoming like just shades behind compensation salary. as like the most important thing that employees are actually underwriting at the company. They're like, the amount of evaluation that's happening around my health insurance and like, do you guys provide fertility support and how are you thinking about mental health has gone up. And so so second largest line item, and very like moving up the stack rank of most employees in terms of their decision to either join your company or not, or stay at your company or not, right? So that's where I think like strategic lever, it's like, well, I mean, you go talk to the CFO and you're like, how do we improve our EBITDA margins next year? Well, health and benefits is actually a massive lever, right? And so, and then number two, it's like, hey, how do we drive retention in our population and make ourselves more attractive and get our, our accept rate in offers up? Benefits is a huge lever there, right? So that's kind of why I think we need to reframe this as sort of strategic, one of the biggest and most strategic sort of like sets of decisions that get made. And then I think just the other thing that we're sort of like on this mission to like shake the HR community, which is like, you are the healthcare buyer for half of Americans. Like, you spent $2.4 trillion on healthcare, you, the HR buyer. And so you hold the purse strings for whether someone has like a good or bad experience if they get cancer. That is very true. And so I think that there's sort of this underlying thing, which is like, we're talking about people's health too. Anyway, that's kind of why I think there's a real reframe here that isn't just sort of soft and qualitative, it's quantitative. It's a financial decision.
So if you're a company that has, let's say, 200 employees, you have, maybe 3 to 5 people on the people team, you don't have somebody that is spending all of their time on benefits. How were they able to be strategic about something like this in the past without a tool like with Nava? And what does it look like to be strategic when it comes to benefits? If you have any good examples for us.
Yeah, I'll make it concrete. I think that I think one of the biggest challenges to being strategic or feeling like you're operating at a very high level as it relates to managing this benefit spend is that most HR teams feel like there are very few alternatives for them. This notion that I don't have optionality when it comes to how I do healthcare, because, and I think the drivers are a couple. One is the amount of in-house domain expertise as it relates to healthcare, self-funding, alternatives to the fully insured model, what's a TPA, and how do PBMs work, is diminishing. So most HR teams have less domain experience in their team than they did probably 10 years ago around just the underlying concepts of healthcare, health insurance, et cetera. And that marketplace has gotten an order of magnitude more complex. So a component, one stat that is just mind-blowing to me, is 15 years ago, the average employer offered 6 distinct benefits, medical insurance, dental insurance, vision, et cetera. Today, that same company offers on average 20 distinct benefits, from caregiver services to mental health to fertility. Each one of those distinct benefits is an entire process in evaluating alternatives, quoting them, trying to make sure that we've got the right fit, educating your employee population. So the complexity is exploded. And so I think what does it mean to be strategic? I think that, and this is sort of one of the big challenges is HR teams are just, in many ways, sort of they're kind of crying uncle. We don't have the capacity internally to go be strategic across all of these different benefits categories, and then of course unpacking your medical, which is 85% of your total spend. So they need a better partner there, and that's why we built Nava. Is we need a much deeper sort of extension of that HR team, and it needs to look like a virtual benefits department that is steeped in sort of alternatives, like vendor alternatives, administration, and then advocacy. A great example of what strategic looks like, and I'll just give a recent example with the client that we serve. There's a group that there are about 275 employees. About 225 of those folks are enrolled in a benefits plan of some kind. They hired Nava recently, and they've been on this sort of 5-year curve of between 10 and 14% healthcare increases annually. You drag that out over 5 years, that is an absurd, so over almost 3x in total spend increase on a per employee per month basis. And they brought in a new HR leader for various other reasons. And this HR leader was sort of I'm sick and tired of it, and I'm not going to take it anymore. And we like Nava gets in the door with HR teams from the traditional brokers for a couple of reasons. One is like my employees are confused and I need help there, and then the other one is I just got a 15% healthcare renewal, and I'm like, at this point in time, I need to find out if there's an alternative path than quoting Aetna versus Cigna fully insured, and maybe poking around there. Long story short, they moved to a medical captive. And I'm not going to bore you guys with the details, but medical captives are very cool. It's like, what if you pooled 10,500, 50 life employers, and turn them into a risk pool that looks like Walmart, and actually has about the buying power of Walmart, like 1 million people. You pulled all of that risk together and that buying power together, and you purchased all the components of insurance. You purchased your pharmacy solution. You purchased your stop loss insurance, et cetera. It's a concept that we deeply believe in and are working on distributing. Anyway, long story short, they moved from a fully insured health plan to that model. They went from like a 15% increase to a 5% decrement, meaning like they actually lowered their per employee per month cost. But more importantly, they're now on a trajectory where we actually have the data, like we understand what claims are coming in, so that we can actually build a benefits program year over year that addresses those claims issues. So if we have a bunch of MSK back issues, now might be a really good time to look at a Sword Health, which does amazing work with MSK and back issues without having to go get a spine surgery, like every year and spend a bunch of money. Those are just like one recent win of like, and I think that's the moment. And your specific question was like, what does it look like to be strategic? And I think like that moment was like that HR leader. She was like, I am ready to like very consciously and intentionally explore the alternative to the world that I am very comfortable with, which is like fully insured health plans, maybe a PEO, maybe the Sequoia Trust, that kind of stuff, and be intentional. And they're winning. Like they're on a trajectory to win in healthcare.
So my mind is still kind of blown by that metric of, and I forget the time period, but benefits being like the 10th or 12th, I forget the number you mentioned, cost line item, and now it's risen to second highest.
Yep. Yeah.
And the, this ever increasing complexity of the benefits business. And another thing that you mentioned that is just crazy is this kind of Stockholm syndrome that exists among HR teams, where, and I'll admit to, I just admitted to this, like benefits are seen as too complex or risky to challenge or change, and so you just kind of go with the status quo. And I just find that like you're not getting what you want. That you don't totally understand it all, but there aren't great options to kind of simplify or to kind of disrupt what you've been doing. So what do? We're just going to do the same thing we've always done. And so, here we are in the AI era of the workplace. Like it's here, like there's no doubt about it. And for me to think that there are leaders that are operating in this place that, of resistance or hesitance or fear, when literally everything is just being disrupted right now. Mm-hmm. What are some things, how are like some of the HR leaders that you're working with that have had that aha moment? What did it take for them to break out of that cycle? And, you talked a little bit about how the role can be more strategic, but like, what is that, what is that impetus, and like, what sort of advice do you have? Like, what else can you share a little more behind the curtains, that will make it seem a little less scary for the HR leaders listening to this?
Yeah, I love that one. Yeah, I think that, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. I think that I think what we're seeing right now, to answer your question, like how can HR leaders break out of that cycle? We are seeing more HR leaders break out of that cycle this year in 2025 than we ever have. Nav is a 5.5-year-old company. This has been by far the busiest year for us in the market. And I think probably one of the core drivers behind that is that it's also the worst renewal season in about 15 years, right? The average healthcare renewal increase is pushing around 10%. Many employers are getting 20, 30, 40% increases. We just signed a client that literally is coming into Nava almost 500 employees with an 80% renewal increase from United Healthcare. That's just like there's no other facet of a business where like, and this is, we're already talking about millions of dollars of spent here, right? So these numbers are getting bonkers. So I think what we are seeing is like the pain from the burning platform is getting so bad, or the temperature is getting so hot, that I think that is pushing more folks to go, okay, it's time to be courageous. Like we have reached the breaking point, et cetera. But on the other side, I think what makes Nava sort of built like the most energizing thing I've ever built, but also the most complicated thing, is that we're bringing together sort of like two very different concepts. We're bringing together sort of like expert benefits consulting that guides you to this whole new marketplace of alternative healthcare solutions to the, BUCA fully insured sort of like, we think about like, runaway train that most folks are on, with an AI benefits platform that is sole job is to like get you out of the day-to-day work of benefits administrative tasks. Like we automate and take over a bunch of that stuff, from auditing your carrier bills to answering compliance questions and answering employee questions, employee advocacy, and then this amazing renewal quoting analysis and decision support tool to help HR teams actually make the right set of decisions, actually guide them from I'm on that train to I'm off the train in a way that they feel empowered. I've got the data and I've got the business case that I can go to my CFO, and he or she is going to be like, thank you. Like I get it and I understand it. So we're bringing those two things together. And I think one of the ways that we have that I think we've been able to pull them sort of like through the journey of change and make it feel easier is that this is as much about just taking work off of your plate. We're like, what if your employees had a place to ask every single question, from what health plan should I choose and why, to can you review this medical bill and tell me if I need to pay for it at scale? That's a sort of a net, that is a painkiller for a lot of HR teams that are kind of buried under that type of, sort of like administrata. So there's kind of this push, which is like the pain of healthcare cost increases, is driving folks to look at the alt universe, which Nava aims to be the best positioned partner to explore that universe with you. The sort of the painkiller that we're offering is like, and we automate and take over so much administrative and employee support work for you that it's like you're going to get 2 or 3 more headcount that you're never going to actually get, on your budget. And so I think those are the two things that we bring together. And I think that, one thing that I am seeing, and we serve a very broad population. So we have, Series D startups with a $10 billion valuation, and they're adding headcount at like, 20% quarterly. And then we serve like large nonprofits in the Midwest, right, where the average salary is $29,000. So some of those teams have like a CEO breathing down their neck going, what's your AI strategy for every single department across my organization? And then some of those teams are like, I've never tried ChatGPT before. Like I've heard of it, it's still scary. And we are like literally the first platform they've used that is an LLM driven platform. My first interaction with, LLMs has been using the Nava Benefits AI to answer a question about like, are GLP-1s covered on, this HDHP plan? So it's a really interesting sort of like broad set of folks. But yeah, it's a fun one. And we're seeing a lot more folks kind of ready to change.
So we do want to talk more about the AI part of it, but before we move on, you've mentioned a couple of times this alt marketplace, and how when you were doing research for this problem you wanted to solve, you saw a lot of innovation in the space. Tell us a little bit more about that. What is this alt marketplace? I'm guessing there are like millions of very niche solutions, but share a little bit more about that.
100%. This is one of the foundational insights that led to Nava, which was that as we explored the supply side landscape, we were blown away by the cool and powerful solutions that had already been built out there. And so it kind of led us to that quote that it's like a Gibson quote, which is like, the future is here, it's just unevenly distributed. It's like, oh my God, like, Garner Health is doing work on the health plan side that, like, if every employer used it, it would massively improve both outcomes and costs. Like, there's an entire sort of landscape of medical captives and unbundled PBMs that can save you 15 to 20% on your pharmacy without any change to actually the drugs that people get. It's just like a more efficient way to get it. So we're just like blown away. We're like, and then when we went to the HR buyer side of things, and we just like brought those vendors with us, we're like, hey, have you heard of this? Have you heard of that? Have you ever tried this? And they're like, never heard of any of it. we're like, that's an interesting problem and an opportunity, right? And so I think so what I mean by, and we sort of colloquially use this term, the alt healthcare, like marketplace, because I think that is what it looks like. There is this sort of traditional approach that everyone understands and feels comfortable with, fully insured, world. And then there's this rapidly growing alternatives marketplace of health plans and point solutions and pharmacy benefits providers, et cetera, that are just attacking the underlying problems of the traditional status quo. The problem that they all have is distribution. It is very hard for them to get access to that HR buyer, largely because the traditional brokerage market is much better compensated and much more incentivized to maintain that traditional status quo. It's also hard to go figure all that stuff out. So I think that that's one of the pillars on which we built Nava, which is we're going to build a bunch of amazing technology that helps HR teams quote 30 times more options in 1/10 the time. And we're going to go and eviscerate a bunch of admin work that they used to have to do. And we're going to go put a benefits concierge in every employee's pocket so that they can answer questions 24/7. But we're also going to build a muscle and sort of an operational imperative, which is we are going to expose you, the HR team of the 300 employee, startup, to this alt marketplace of solutions in a way that you can actually make a purchase decision comfortably, right? And so that's one of the big things that we do. One of the sort of key metrics of Nava is like, how many fully insured employers are we actually moving to one of these alternative plans, paradigms, funding arrangements, et cetera, successfully, right? So that's sort of the story behind that story. And what I'll just say one last thing. This year is a year where more employers than I've ever seen in my career in doing Nava are saying, I want to get to know that alt marketplace, because what we're doing right now is objectively and quantifiably not working for us.
I mean, I want to learn more about these alt solutions, and for me,
Yeah, I can give you a bunch of examples if you want to get like super nerdy.
I literally just took a note to self, go ask bots about the alt marketplace.
100%. And I'll just give you there's just like Garner Health doing amazing things by basically creating a high performing network of doctors inside of a normal United Healthcare network. So it's the top 10 percentile of doctors, and it builds a health plan around going to the best doctors, because the data shows that going to the best doctors lowers your actual cost. So it's a really cool plan hack where it's like you basically have a $0 deductible if you go to the best doctor. That's just one example. A company called Sidecar Health is doing amazing work around price transparency. So I actually know what things cost before I swipe my card, and I can actually shop as an informed consumer around that MRI and whatnot. They've done a bunch of work to pull that together. That's like 2 of dozens of solutions out in the marketplace that are compelling, right? But no one knows about.
Yeah, I mean, the older I get and the more, I'm not even going to call them health problems, but just little things that pop up. So I'm 31, and Steven, he's been telling me that once you hit 30, it's all it's all downhill. You start having these little things pop up every month or two. And on top of that, my wife we just had a baby 5 months ago, and the postpartum process and having different healthcare needs than you've probably ever had before, and realizing that the best options for you might not be covered by your provider, and that being shitty and you having to pay out of pocket. And so when I think about a tool like Nava, I'm just imagining being an employee and being able to go in and say this is what I'm looking for, and I can't seem to find anything in network. Help me out. What are some solutions? Am I interpreting, how somebody would use Nava correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. Our technology platform is called HQ. So we have HQ for the HR team and HQ for employees. HQ for employees is, the sort of the technology roadmap line that we are on is it will be the smartest and most informed benefits and health concierge for you and your family. And it sits on top of a data stack that only we have, because we designed the health plan for your employer. We know exactly what elections you have. We understand, we're integrated with your insurance carrier, so we know how much of your insurance you spend. So Daniel, you can ask it anything from hey, I need to get a pair of glasses. What's the cheapest place for me to go, and how much will it cost at Costco with my vision insurance? To, can you help me find an in-network dermatologist for my kid that's conveniently located? To, hey, I just took a photo of an explanation of benefits in EOB, and I have no idea what it means. Can you help me understand it? And then tell me if I need to pay it. And then if there's a whole negotiation or like access to care issue, we escalate that to our expert benefits advocates who have decades of experience doing claims negotiation, coding. They're doing like the really important heavy duty casework. And so that's the spirit of what we're doing. And we are training all of this sits on top of Nava's benefits AI. We think we're building the most powerful benefits AI ever built. And it is getting smarter and smarter at answering questions related to kind of the intersection of your health insurance and benefits and health questions and benefits questions. That's the direction that we go. And I think we're, fast forward this 3 or 4 years, and I think you start to just move more and more toward like the agentic use cases where it's like, just do these things for me. Hey, could you actually book that appointment for me? Yeah, we can, because we've integrated voice AI now. And actually we can make that call to Dr. Hendershot and like go get the thing scheduled for you. And then we'll round trip it. We're about to launch a feature for the HR teams, which is like instantaneous carrier bill auditing across any line of coverage. Turns out 90% of employers' carrier bills are just wrong. Someone who left the company 2 months ago is still on the carrier bill and you're paying for them. Someone has actually just got the wrong coverage. So when they unfortunately go to the dentist, it's going to be like, sorry, you don't have any insurance. They're like, that's messed up. And so we're like, how do we make that like insanely easy to spot and fix? And so like the current version of that is automate the process of auditing. The future of that is actually go remediate all of those errors with the insurance carriers agentically. So that's kind of how we think about the opportunity for AI and advocacy and member support, AI and like it sort of greasing the wheels on administration. And then from a renewal strategy standpoint, we think about how do we like kind of phase one was like, how do we make the quoting and analysis process for medical, dental, vision, all of the different things that you're actually shopping for take about like 90% less time than it does for traditional brokers who are doing all this stuff on spreadsheets. And then next is how do we actually interstitial AI into that process to give recommendations and help us goal seek towards specific things. Like, hey, I am trying to goal seek towards 70th percentile in my benchmark for 100 to 500 employee technology companies, right? We've got the benchmarking data. We understand your renewals. And so we can actually help you build a plan that just stays there, right? Those are sort of the opportunities that we have by kind of bringing together technology with this sort of benefits.
I love it. I mean, my mind just keeps expanding in ways that I wasn't really expecting it to be expanded. And these are the best podcasts that we record are the ones where I'm just like, my mind has been reframed on like a really important part of the people space. And so Daniel and I, we're super privileged to like, we're so lucky. We have the coolest job to be able to meet with the Brandon Webbers of the world. We've spoken with so many HR leaders that are like icons now. I mean, it's still early days in AI transformation for HR, but like some of the top people leaders that you'll see on LinkedIn, we are even companies now, like AI-based companies. And one of the top names on the list for me is someone named Brandon Samet. He's the chief people officer at Zapier. He has been on the show multiple times. He came on the show with Wade, their CEO. And early in the AI transformation day, so this is probably like, 9 months ago, maybe a little longer, a year, he walked us through how they did a company-wide week-long and the hackathon. Yeah. This is like cultural transformation plus like real-world solutions and iterating, et cetera, et cetera. One of the top initial use cases they identified was a benefits help desk to answer employee questions. So someone on his team looked at the number of benefits questions that the HR team got. They found like a run rate cost of like the HR team, and they built a business case that was like, hey, we're answering like thousands of benefits questions a year. That equates to this millions of dollars in time that we're spending. And guess what? It's like rinse and repeat. We have to do it all over next year and the year after and the year after. And so, and so this was just for answering employee questions. And so not every company, like fast forward to today, what people are realizing is not everyone has the types of dev resources that, that Brandon had at his disposal. And so you've described Nava as like the AI strategy for HR teams when it comes to benefits. And I think this is something that is like genius and hugely needed. But For those that are early in their AI transformation, or maybe they haven't even used an LLM within the HR team, like what does this look like in practice? And like, what does the Nava AI solution solve for the HR team? In addition to some of the things you already shared.
Yeah, totally. No, I think that sort of what we hear is kind of the, let's call it the mental framework for like, what's your AI strategy, insert department name, there is you're trying to get to a place where like, how do we utilize AI, either sort of off the shelf tools or partners, or build our own to drive efficiency, drive better outcomes with our internal, external customers, save money, right? So those are sort of the outcomes that folks are trying to drive. And I think that we think about, we're like the platform that we are building aims to be that strategy for everything that you think about related to benefits. And there's really kind of three outcomes that we focus on. One is the Zapier use case. So we offer 24/7 personalized employee support around all things benefits as well as advocacy delivered at scale. So that's number one. So get you out of the business of being that middle person from decision support at open enrollment through just direct usage. Number one, infinitely scalable, like scales when works when your employee base is 250 or 2,500. Second is get the HR team out of the majority of the benefits administrative work that they have to do so that they can reallocate those resources to other things. So that's bill audits, compliance questions, managing the compliance calendar, handling eligibility around employee benefits enrollment. And then the third one is deploy AI to help you spend your healthcare dollars more effectively. We talk a lot about like HQ is going to help the HR team moneyball their benefit spend when it comes to renewal season. So what that looks like is the software that we built enables you to crunch like 10x more scenarios. These alt-funded scenarios make it easier for you to shop all of that stuff in 1/10 the time. So you can just look at a much broader market, make a much more informed decision. And then we build a better executive business case for your CFO and your CEO so you can actually get those things. So those are the three kind of use cases of AI inside of the Nava value proposition. Employee support, wipe away a bunch of the admin work, and make you a better steward of the dollars when you're going through renewal by helping you shop that market at 10x the pace in 1/10 the time.
Moneyball. Say that again. Help you moneyball your benefit spend.
Moneyball, your benefit spend. I'm a big fan of the book Moneyball. But yeah, the idea behind Moneyball was like apply data science to what was a very traditional problem that, oh my God, there's all these optimizations we can do when we look at through a data lens. We see just an absolutely massive, this is like $1 trillion opportunity to apply AI and data science to this process of renewal analysis, like quoting renewals and building the right benefits plan for employers.
And right now you're saying that most of this is done in spreadsheets.
Yeah,
That your broker just has like a massive spreadsheet or what?
And we did before, like you rewind 3 years ago. And so it's just like, how is this done? It is a massive, probably 20-year-old spreadsheet template that is laying out, the 4 different quotes that we've got, and tab 2 is dental, et cetera. That is getting emailed to the HR team by the, broker from Gallagher or Hub or MMA or wherever. It's Byzantine and very hard for anyone to understand. It's also incredibly fragile. So like an HR person's like, I don't really want to touch anything, even though I'd like to make tweaks. And then here's the crazy thing is that, and this is what actually ends up happening, is like HR teams just run out of time to make a good decision because everything takes too long. And so they're like, hey, I looked at the spreadsheet. What if we actually made a little tweak? My CFO is asking it, what if we shifted contributions for this one plan from like 75% to 80%? And they email that back. The broker's like, yeah, I'll get my finance team to work on that. And we'll send an updated spreadsheet like 4 or 5 days later. And so that repeats. And so the result of that sort of friction and speed is that you get almost nothing done. Like you can't actually look at alternatives. You can't actually go and run a bunch of different scenarios and goal seek to different things. So you just run out of time. And that was like the first thing that it's a nightmare. And so like the first thing that we had to solve for, and LLMs really helped us do this, is how do you make that quoting and scenario modeling process go from that to just real time live on the screen? Like, let's drag a few different things. My CFO just asked me a couple things. Let's look at this. Yeah, it's just wild how different this is. And so I'll just give you the specifics like that. Running a single medical renewal quote in that traditional sort of structure takes a professional about 6 hours to extract the data, get it into this brittle thing, peer review it, et cetera. At Nava, that's like an 8 to 10 minute process, right? And so it's like we can do like 30 times more of those in that same time with that technology.
So you can put like 10 options in front of somebody.
Yeah.
Versus
and then you can do an 11th in like 2 minutes. And you're like, hey, let's actually just go through a bunch of different small scenarios in terms of how we structure different plans. So you guys get the point. I mean, it's like, it's the equivalent of going from like, paper and pen to I'm looking for airlines, flights on kayak or something like that. That's, I think, the opportunity.
Oh my God. Yeah. I keep shaking my head because I feel like we're just getting started, Brandon, but we actually need to bring this conversation to a close. And so we got to find a way to do a deeper dive, just like, because Daniel will never even know about the spreadsheets that you're talking, the quotes. And it's anyone that's worked in it, like it is a literal nightmare. And so anyhow, maybe we can find another way of like actually going deeper into this, but we're at that point where we have a couple of traditions left to get through, and I know we need to get you out of here. And so the next segment is what we call rapid fire questions. It is the same set of questions that we ask all our guests who are typically HR leaders. So this might be a little wonky for you, but I think you've got this. You ready to do it?
Give it a go. Yeah,
cool.
Let's do it.
First question, what's one piece of advice that you'd give to someone starting in HR today?
I would say think about your role and function from the CEO's vantage point. I think it just creates an entirely different mindset. It's like, what is the CEO trying to accomplish? And like, what is the job of HR to help them accomplish it? That would be my one.
That's great advice. Question 2. If your team gave you a superpower nickname, what would it be?
That's a good one. Probably like, I went with like pain cave because I think I love endurance sports. I like enjoy the pain of building a company. I enjoy the pain of running for 10 hours at a time. So I think people would say that's my superpower. They'd probably call me pain cave.
Also relatable. Next question. If you could steal one strategy from another company, I'm interested to hear your response. If you could steal one strategy from another company, could be anything, not necessarily HR, what would it be?
I really admire Ramp, which is the sort of the finance and spending platform. They have done just an incredible job of, I think, bringing to life the pain of like expense management and just the problem in a way that's just so visceral and like so motivating to like get to their solution. So like we are constantly trying to do that for healthcare and plan design, stuff like that. I think they're great.
There's this podcast I listen to called, I think it's just called Founders, and Ramp is like their big sponsor. And I swear their ads get me every single time. Like, I'm like, how did I fall for that? Yeah, they're doing something right. Next question. Who do we need to have onto the show next?
Man, that's a great question. I'm just going to give you 2 people. There's a woman named Kara Brennan. She leads People Tech Partners. She's like a multi-time chief people officer at just unicorn awesome companies. She's just the best. So super fun and super connected to all the things that we're talking about. I'd probably go with her.
Awesome. Well, that we don't have any time to talk, but noted. Last tradition on the show, and we'll be done. We call it one word or phrase close. It's just a way as we reflect on the last hour or so that we've spent together, just, what comes to mind, how we want to wrap things up. And again, we like our guests to go first.
Cool. Energizing. I'm fired up. To get back to breaking rocks and pushing us forward on the mission. How about you?
I'm going to say inspired. Yeah. The CEO episodes where we have on, some of the top like founders from HR tech companies. I feel like even from the best companies, it feels like the messaging can be stale sometimes, and there's not like as much innovation as I would like to see. And I feel pretty inspired coming out of this. Like there are some founders like you that are working on some like pretty cool shit. So that's what I would go with.
I'm going to go with a few words, and mine is, I get it. I get why Daniel left that intake call so fired up. In fact, I think we were like 15 minutes in. I literally said, I get it. I get it now. I see why you're so hyped. So Brandon, thank you so much for joining us and sharing all the great things you're up to at Nava. Hopefully we, consider you part of the family now. So hopefully you'll come back sometime and join us again, but it's been an absolute blast. So thank you.
I've had an absolute blast. And like final message to HR teams listening, it's like, you guys have so much more agency when it comes to healthcare and the healthcare of your employees than maybe you were led to believe. So it's just like, let's go run with that.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, y'all. Have a good one.
Bye,
guys.
Thanks, gang. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Modern People Leader. We really, really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating. It would mean the world to us. And connect with us on LinkedIn. We want to know what you think about the show, and you can find links to both of our profiles in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and see you on the next episode.